Want to welcome everyone that's online. I think we got things going there. So we'll get started in just a moment as everyone is greeting each other in here. But we sure are glad that you're here online with us. And so, okay, we're ready to get started. I was told that this was secondhand, but I was told that I needed some better jokes. And so I put the word out, and the first thing I got was from Joan. She said, here's some Reader Digest stuff. So if you take Reader's Digest, then you've probably seen these. But this is a Pictionary. If you've ever played Pictionary game. So let me see if you can guess what these are. Paradox. No. No. This is Goosebumps. Goosebumps. Now the second one is a little bit easier, I think. Bird brain. Yes. You got that one. What about this one? Just in case. That's very good. And then this one? Traveling light. Man, y'all are good. Now, had anybody seen those in Reader's Digest already? No, so I got it to you early. Okay, announcements. We've got the ladies' breakfast coming up on August 2nd, and then we've got Bible 101 starting on the 3rd, and also the McAllister wedding shower is going to be the 3rd. Check, make sure everything's okay up there. And we are in a series where we've been looking at Jesus and the temple. So it's been kind of interesting. We looked at the boy Jesus in the temple, and I'm sure you're acquainted with that famous story where he got left behind. And then we talked about him being the Lord of the Sabbath. Being God and the one who created the Sabbath, it was very interesting when people start challenging him about the Sabbath. And he's saying, wait, I am. And so it's like you're talking to the boss and complaining about some of the things like that. And then Jamie last week, did he talk to you about cleansing the temple? Excellent. So Jamie took over while I was at camp, Heaven Bound. And today we're going to see Jesus predicting the destruction of the temple. We may even look at what happened in 70 AD if we have time. So let's get right into the scripture. We're going to be in Matthew 24. This will be verse 1. Jesus left the temple and was walking along when his disciples came up to him to call his attention to the buildings. How beautiful these buildings are. And they were really impressed with the temple. And it is impressive. Joan and I and Billy and Paula, I don't see them here, but Billy and Paula and Joan and I were on a tour, and we were in Barcelona, Spain. Anybody been to the temple that's the Roman Catholic Basilica under construction in Barcelona, Spain? This thing has been under construction for probably a century. It's the largest unfinished Catholic church in the world. And it was designed by the Catalan architect Antoni Gaudi. Now, that's not where the word gaudy came from, but it sure is a gaudy church. That thing, when you start looking at it from afar, it kind of looks like a huge Catholic church. But when you start getting closer to it, you start seeing all the intricacies that they have put into that thing. And they're still doing it. They're still putting little statues. I mean, there was a crane there when we were there that was lifting these pineapples and stuff and putting them up on top of those big spires. It was amazing. And then you go inside, and it's even gaudier inside. So if you ever get a chance, if you're in Barcelona, you've got to go and see this thing. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And that's right. I-20, I-35. So Gaudi managed to fuse architecture, nature, and religion in this emblematic monument. And it's quite gaudy. Now, he did the same thing with some houses around Barcelona. So you see those also when you're traveling around Barcelona. But Gaudi, G-O-U-D-I, look it up and look at some of the intricacies there. Oh, Gaudi Park? We didn't get to see that. Oh, wow. Well, it's amazing what people build to worship God. And that's what the apostles were looking at. And then they were amazed at the temple that was built there to worship our God. And Jesus turned to them and said, well, do you see all these things? Truly, I tell you, not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down. So, this is an 11-minute video that actually shows how this artist felt like the destruction of the temple took place. When the Romans attacked Jerusalem, they besieged it, and then they proceeded over a length of time to wear down the Jewish defenses, and then eventually overthrow the temple and destroy it. That was 70 A.D. General Titus was the one that made this pivotal moment in Jewish history. The second temple was set on fire and ultimately destroyed, leading to significant changes in Jewish religious life. I'm not going to show the video yet. I may show it at the end if we have time. But 70 A.D., that happened. That's 40 years after what Jesus was talking about. So he was actually predicting the destruction of the temple. And as Jesus, maybe we're going to watch it now.
The stage was now set for a fight over the very heart of Jerusalem, the Temple Mount. The left end of the ragged Jewish line was stationed at the western gate with access to the upper city. The right flank was anchored on the opposite side of the colonnade at Solomon's portico. The center of the line ran through the temple and its inner court. The Romans held the north, the Jews the south. Both sides were prepared for a fateful duel within the enormous gladiatorial arena that was the Temple Mount complex. In the center of the battlefield was the linchpin of the Jewish defenses, the inner temple. Just like the Temple Mount, the temple was surrounded by a wall with wide fighting platforms atop a series of perimeter colonnades. The eastern half of the compound was known as the Court of Women. This was then connected to the western half by another wall and the Corinthian Gate. On the other side lay the Court of the Israelites, and beyond that, the Court of the Priests. At the very end lay the Holy of Holies, a 45-meter-tall, white marble edifice adorned with enormous golden gates and topped by golden points. This was said to be the very house of God, in which only the high priest entered on the Day of Atonement. In fact, the entire inner temple was normally off-limits to all but a select few. Extraordinary circumstances, however, call for extraordinary measures, and the holy spaces today were packed with defenders. Despite being exhausted and on the verge of starvation, the Jews attacked at dawn on August 9th. Troops burst out of the eastern gate and rushed the Roman lines in force. The surprised legions reeled from the punch, but managed to hold their ground. Once more, Titus had his cavalry mount up and charge across the open ground. The small group of horses crashed into the Jewish mob, sending shockwaves through the mass of men. However, the attack failed to dissuade the rebels, and the third battle of the temple began. This engagement was characterized by a confused series of attacks and counterattacks along the eastern end of the sanctuary. Jewish defenders offered supporting fire from atop the nearby temple rooftops, while their Roman counterparts did the same from their own rear line.
Watch what Gen X do to stop heartburn.
Heartburn is actually caused not by stomach acid. The The fighting raged on for several hours before subsiding into an uneasy stalemate. The following day, August 10th, the Jews again launched an attack on the Romans holding the outer court, initiating the fourth battle of the temple. The engagement was similarly hard fought, but the crush of a Roman counterattack managed to drive the defenders right up to the temple walls itself. Here, Jews atop the walls dislodged stones and threw down an assortment of projectiles onto the Romans. However, in the close press below, a pair of legionaries were seized by impulse. One grabbed a piece of flaming debris, while the other hoisted him up against the north side of the temple. From this elevation, he lobbed the burning timber through a low, golden door into the sanctuary chambers. In the summer heat, the highly flammable timbers and textiles took light. Thick, black smoke billowed into the air as fire spread rapidly to the stunned amazement of both sides. The fire rapidly spiraled out of control, threatening to consume the countless sacred texts and treasures within the temple. The Jews were left paralyzed between choosing to fight the flames or the Romans. The legions seized on the initiative and plunged forward without orders. They battered down the eastern gates and penetrated the inner court of the temple. In this moment, at the climax of a grueling 3-month siege, the attackers gave way to their bestial nature. Soldiers broke free from their officers, controlled only by a toxic psychological state of repressed rage and frustration. Pity was the first casualty, soon followed by a butchery of all those who did not flee the hellscape. The young, the old, the helpless, all were put to the sword. This bloodlust would only be matched in intensity by greed. Roman soldiers plunged into the flaming complex, intent on making off with treasures inside. The frenzy reached a fever pitch where Roman troops were being trampled to death by their comrades. The arrival of Titus seemed to have little effect on the state of the men. This was often a natural occurrence in the final stages of a siege, when even the ablest of commanders could do nothing to restrain the wild passions of soldiers. Eventually, the delirium subsided when the temple was picked clean by both men and flames. Chants of Imperator, Imperator, Imperator greeted Titus as he ordered the sacrifice of an ox, a sheep, and a pig at the eastern gate of the temple. With this move, he consummated the domination of the Roman gods over that of the Jews. Though the Temple Mount had fallen, Jewish resistance in the rest of Jerusalem had not. Simon's militia and those who had escaped the smoldering ruins of the temple regrouped atop the entrenched positions in the upper city and Herod's palace. From here, they faced off against the legions across the Tyrrhene Valley. A parley was held atop a bridge linking the two sides. The Jewish commanders, Simon and John, attempted to bargain for their free passage out of Jerusalem. Titus, however, was emboldened by his recent victory and demanded no less than an unconditional surrender. When talks broke down, the legions were unleashed on the lower city in a demonstration of force. For 2 days, they hacked their way through tight alleys and rooftops, cutting down rebels and non-combatants alike. Fires were also set to clear out any survivors from the lower districts. The flames did tremendous damage to life and property. They also engulfed vast quantities of dead bodies in various stages of decay, filling the air with a horrid stench. All that remained now was the last stronghold of Herod's palace. This fortress was dominated by strong walls and a ring of towers ranging from 25 to 40 meters tall. In addition, the buildings of the upper city blocked a clear line of approach, while numerous underground passages could allow the Jews to carry out effective sorties against incoming siege works. The Romans had faced significant trouble against similar defenses already and were not eager to try it once more. Instead, the attackers opted to mount their assault from the west, flanking from outside the walls of Jerusalem. All 4 legions now massed in the Hinnom Valley and began construction of a final set of siege ramps. Allied and auxiliary troops within Jerusalem also set to work on their own platforms against the upper city, located at the Viaduct, the Gymnasium, and Simon's Tower. Resources and manpower for the Romans were extremely sparse. This delayed construction to a degree, but the projects were inevitably completed by the end of 2.5 weeks. On September 7th, the Romans were able to bring up the remaining rams and begin battering down the walls. The Jewish forces at this point were so weakened that for the first time, they did not lead sorties out against the siege equipment. Defenders attempted to offer resistance from the top of the walls, but were easily swept aside by massed fire of Roman projectiles. Sections of the western wall began to crumble. legionaries punched their way through the breaches against a defensive force that was quickly disintegrating. It seems that the reality of a final defeat swept in with the Roman troops and captured the battlements more quickly than any sword could. The high towers of the Hippicus, the Phasael, and the Miriam were all abandoned as survivors either gave in to the inevitable or went to ground. The Jewish leaders, along with groups of dedicated fighters, ran in all directions, desperately seeking to find a way through the Roman lines. Many were caught by Roman street patrols, while others resorted to crawling through sewers or even attempted to tunnel their way out of the city. In the end, both Simon and John were captured.
That's why your ears won't stop ringing, and why silence feels impossible.
Captured alive. They, along with 700 other young men, would be sent to Rome to be put on full display for the eventual triumph of Titus. All remaining males of the age of 17 and above were shackled and sentenced to death, either in the mines of Egypt or in the gladiatorial arenas around the empire. The women and children were taken to the slave markets. All told, we have no accurate figures for how many lives were extinguished or enslaved as a result of the sacking of Jerusalem. Josephus would have us believe that over 1.1 million were killed, while Tacitus offers a more plausible 600,000. These numbers both seem wildly inflated, but may be an indication of the carnage that took place when Titus resolved on destroying a highly populated city filled with refugees and pilgrims. We have only to look at the modern sieges like Stalingrad to imagine the horrors which befell the numerous non-combatants trapped within the walls. Back in Rome, Emperor Vespasian was busy preparing the stage for the honorable return of his son. The victory at Jerusalem warranted a triumph and would be used as a centerpiece for the legitimization of the Flavian dynasty. When the time came, Titus would parade down the streets of Rome atop a chariot at the head of a procession glorifying the conquests in the east. Soldiers and captives marched down the streets in full regalia alongside floats depicting dramatic scenes from the campaign. Vast amounts of treasure were also on display, including the great seven-branched menorah. The crowning moment of the festivities involved the flaying and ritual strangulation of Simon Gioras, who had served as the overall commander of the Jewish forces during the siege. While the revolt may have been symbolically crushed, Jewish resistance would burn on until the final Roman suppression of Masada in 73 AD. Though this would bring about the conclusion of the first Jewish revolt, there would be several more to follow, each with increasing levels of devastation. The Siege of Jerusalem stands out as one of the most brutal examples of classical-era total war since the fall of Carthage 200 years earlier. Humans did this. Hundreds of thousands of babies, cradled by mothers, grew up through millions of unique experiences only to find themselves all at Jerusalem. Each of their stories worthy of its own novel, unraveled one way or another over these 3 months, and have, through the great filter of history, been reduced to a reference in this very sentence. I don't think you or I, or our species, has the capacity to truly understand this. In the end, perhaps all we can do is take the time to pause and reflect. As we do this, we can, in a way, commune with our ancestors who did the same. At Carthage, for instance, it is said that Scipio Aemilianus weepingly looked over the flames which engulfed the city, imagining that one day such flames would be seen over Rome itself. At Jerusalem, we can imagine that Titus was also seized by similar thoughts. Today, I am sure, we can also bow our heads humbly and reflect upon the destruction we reap across the world, which may one day return to our own homes.
Okay. That kind of gives you an idea of what Jesus was predicting was going to happen. And he knew it was going to happen. And when he told them that this was going to happen, they wanted to know when. Is it going to be during our lifetime? When is this going to happen? As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately and said, "Tell us, when will this happen, and what will be the sign of your coming age and the end of the age?" So we always want to tell the future, don't we? We always want to know what's coming. And something that drastic coming would be scary. And so they want to know. Of course, they're familiar, very familiar with Daniel and how he told the future through Nebuchadnezzar's dreams, that Daniel was given special insight. They were also familiar with Joseph and how he told Pharaoh's future. And so, as we at Camp Heavenbound looked at Daniel in depth, we saw Daniel being able to tell the future. But Jesus said, watch out that no one deceives you. And I do hear every so often that someone is deceived. And it's probably because we're so gullible, aren't we? We are gullible because we can click on something that does a lot of damage to our computer or to our iPad. And just this, I guess it was last month, my mom clicked on something, and they started asking her questions, and they got down to where they were asking for her credit card to fix her Microsoft machine. And she said, wait a minute. She'd already given him the credit card number, and she hung up on him. Now, what transpired next, I was real proud of my mom, because she got in the car, didn't put her makeup on, didn't fix her hair, drove straight to the bank, and instead of going up to the front desk, she walked into the manager's office and said, I need help. And they said, calm down, calm down. Here's a glass of water. Let's talk about this. So they canceled the credit card and all that. But so many people are gullible, and they're falling victim to scammers and manipulators. So I wanted to stop for just a second and talk about that. How can we be less vulnerable? Avoiding falling victim to scammers and manipulators. First of all, you got to be skeptical. When you get something that says, if you would like to get $300 free from Costco, you know that's not going to be true. You got to be skeptical. Joan's real skeptical about things, aren't you, Joan? I'm more gullible than she is, probably, although I'm pretty good with all these scammers. But you got to be skeptical. Sharpen your brain and build common sense. Study these things. Know what's coming on the horizon. Is there something that's going to be scamming you soon? Be aware of that, and just use your common sense. Yes. Yes, they're getting better and better. The scammers are able to take things that look so real and actually change the ID on your phone so that it says it's the bank or it says it's someone that you did business with. And it is very hard. So and we as Christians trust each other, don't we? We rely on our brothers and sisters, and sometimes we let that spread into other places. And you're good people. Aren't there good people out there? But there's also evil people out there. But you got to learn from your mistakes. And when you do make a mistake like that, you don't do it a second time, do you? Now, when you're dealing with people in person and they're trying to scam you, pay attention to their body language. A lot of things, when people are lying, you can kind of sense that. And there's gullibility hotspots, and the internet is one of them. The internet is a gullibility hotspot, so, and your email is too. And this was a funny one. Keep track about how many times you're pranked by your friends. If you're gullible, you're going to be pranked more often than everybody else. So if you start seeing that, then be aware. You could be one of those gullible people that other people are going to take advantage of. And look out for shady deals. There are things offered at a good price and more. We got off the bus in, I think it was China, and we were touring in China. And what do you see when you get off a bus, a tourist bus? You see scammers that are selling Gucci purses that last until the next stop of the bus. That's a true story. Some ladies bought these Gucci purses, and then at the next stop, they had already fallen apart. But they'd only paid $10 for it. Look out for those shady deals. And a lot of times your gut's going to be telling you something's wrong. Listen to your gut. Trust your instincts. And hit the pause button. When something looks real good, it's something you've been searching for on Amazon, and now you see it on another place that they've got a better price. Hit the pause button. Check out that company. Don't be gullible. And know what to look for. There are companies that are warning us about the things that are coming. DuckDuckGo, the search engine, does a good job of sending out a newsletter that tells you about what the latest scams are and what to look out for. So be aware of that, because there are many, many scammers. And Jesus was telling the disciples that for many will come in my name claiming I am the Messiah and will deceive many. And that's a big one. How do you identify false teachers? If we look at the scriptures in Isaiah, it says, look to God's instructions and teaching. People who contradict His word are completely in the dark. And then in Malachi, it says, then you will again see the difference between the righteous and the wicked, between those who serve God and those who do not. So if they're actually doing service for God, we're more likely to trust them and believe that they're a good teacher. Beware of false prophets who come disguised as harmless sheep, but are really vicious wolves. You can identify them by their fruit. That is, by the way they act. Can you pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? A good tree produces good fruit, and a bad tree produces bad fruit. So look at the fruit. 1 John 2:22 says, and who is a liar? Anyone who says that Jesus is not the Christ. Anyone who identifies the Father and the Son, who denies the Father and Son, is an antichrist. And the last one, Galatians 5:22 through 26. So here's the fruit. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. There's no law against such things. Now those who belong to the Messiah, Jesus, have crucified their flesh with its passions and desires. And since we live by the Spirit let us be guided. And let's stop being arrogant, provoking one another, and envying one another. So beware of false teachers. Don't be deceived, Jesus said. And if you're looking to the future and trying to determine when this time is going to come, He tells His disciples, you will hear of wars, threats of wars, but don't panic. Yes, these things must take place, but the end won't follow immediately. And if you look at how many wars are going on right now, there was a long list of wars that were going on. I just picked the top 10. We've got the Ukrainian-Russian war, the Palestine war. Look at the casualties that are occurring just in 2024. 49,000 in Ukraine, 22,000 casualties in Palestine. Myanmar, 13,000. Sudan, 9,000. Ethiopia, and it goes right on down the list. Some of them are country to country. Some of them are civil wars. Some of them are terrorist insurgencies. One of them, Mexico, is a drug war. So those wars are going to happen. And Jesus said, nation will go to war against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines, and earthquakes in many parts of the world, famines. Check out the global deaths from famines by decade from 1870 to 2023. When you look at this, you'll see that many of those famines have occurred in China. Look at the red. Those are China. The deadliest famine with an estimated 36 million deaths between 1958 and 1962 occurred in China, called the Great Leap. Many of those Christians probably thought the end of the world must be here. This is terrible. So many people dying. And yet the world went on. You see, there's fewer famines in the last few decades. But what about the earthquakes he's talking about? I just took one day, Sunday, July 13th of this year, and I looked at that. There were 6 quakes that were above 5 magnitude. There were 40 quakes at 4 magnitude, 195 quakes of 3 magnitude, and 319 over 2. That's just in one day. That's a lot. 560 total earthquakes in one day. Earthquakes will continue, but Jesus said, this is only the first of the birth pains, with more to come. Any of y'all go through Braxton Hicks contractions? Raise your hand if you did. Mike, you did not. Maybe you did. I have heard of men going through Braxton Hicks. I know Joan went through some, and it was not the real labor yet, but it was still painful. We are going through, in this world, birth pains for the coming of the end, in the new creation that's going to happen. And Jesus said, that was to the world, but now he's narrowing it down, and he's going to talk directly to the disciples. Then you will be arrested, persecuted, and killed. You will be hated all over the world because you are my followers. When you look at each of the men that Jesus was talking to, and you think about those 12 that were so close to him, and now he's telling them, you're going to be hated. He's giving them a little taste of what's coming up. Peter, he doesn't tell him this, but we know from the legends that we've heard that Peter was crucified upside down on an X-shaped cross. And James, the son of Zebedee, was a fisherman by trade, and Jesus called him to a lifetime of ministry as a strong leader of the church. James was beheaded at Jerusalem. James, the other James, the leader of the church in Jerusalem, was thrown over 100 feet down from the southeast pinnacle of the temple when he refused to deny Jesus Christ and his faith in Jesus. When they discovered that he survived the fall, they say his enemies beat James to death with clubs. That was the same place where Satan had taken Jesus during the temptation and said, if we threw you down from here, angels would catch you. Thomas was stabbed with a spear in India during one of his missionary trips to establish the church in the subcontinent. And Jude was killed with arrows when he refused to deny his faith in Christ. Mark died in Alexandria, Egypt, after being dragged by horses through the streets until he was dead. Matthew suffered martyrdom in Ethiopia, killed by a sword. Luke was hanged in Greece as a result of his tremendous preaching to the lost. Matthias, who replaced Judas, was stoned and then beheaded. John was the only one, they say, that died a natural death, and he was in exile in the island of Patmos. And Jesus went on to say, and many will turn away from me and betray and hate each other. You know, there seems to be an anti-Christian religious persecution that's on the rise. And it's been that way for some time. I mean, you see these terrorists that took Christians and beheaded them. And Jesus said, there will be many false prophets that will appear and deceive many people. You look at the religions of the world, Christianity is still the largest, 31%. Islam, 24%. Hinduism, 15%. Buddhism, 7%. Folk religions, 6%. And then there's others, 1%. And Judaism, 0.2%. Unaffiliated, 16%. Jesus said that there would be these false teachers. And we think about the Muslim world, 1.8 billion Muslims worldwide, deceived. And he said, sin will be rampant everywhere, and the love of many will grow cold. So many sins that you see, even on TV, you can see the sins. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. Endurance. Obstacles can't stop you. Problems can't stop you. Most of all, other people can't stop you. The only one who stops you is yourself. You can endure. And then he said, and the good news about the kingdom will be preached throughout the whole world so that all nations will hear it. And then the end will come. And you look at the countries, the 10 top countries with the largest number of Christians. United States, Brazil, Mexico, Russia, Philippines, Nigeria, Congo. There are a lot of Christians, 2.2 billion Christians. So our challenge is to endure. And one of the ways is to look around you and thank God. And that's the challenge for this week. Pray and thank God for your specific Christian brothers and sisters. I know we're praying for people that are hurting, but I want you this week to pick out certain Christian brothers and sisters and specifically thank God for them. Okay?